So as Trump likes to call her, Marjorie Traitor Green is flipping the script, and she essentially called Donald Trump a traitor. And you know what? She might not really be wrong on this one. This is what she had to say.
I was called a traitor by a man that I fought for 6 years for. And I gave him my loyalty for free. I won my first election without his endorsement, beating 8 men in a primary. And I've never owed him anything, but I fought for him for the policies and for America first. And he called me a traitor for standing with these women and refusing to take my name off the discharge petition. Let me tell you what a traitor is. A traitor is an American that serves foreign countries and themselves. A patriot is an American that serves the United States of America and Americans like the women standing behind me. And I want to tell you that this only became possible today because the American people whom we serve as representatives here in Congress demanded that this vote happen, and they put more pressure on every single elected politician in this city than has ever been put on them. And today you are going to see probably a unanimous vote in the House to release the Epstein files, but the real fight will happen after that.
Let me tell you about Ground News, a platform I genuinely use and I actually like. What I appreciate about Ground News is that they don't pretend to give you unbiased news. Instead, they show you where the bias is, what direction it's leaning, and which outlets are framing the same story in completely different ways. And in today's environment, with the information overload, the sensationalism, the algorithms trying to manipulate what you see, that transparency really matters. Let me give you an example. Take the recent stories about the Epstein files. Dozens of outlets covered it, but depending on where you looked, the headline totally changed the tone. Some left-leaning outlets framed it as Trump's going down, while right-leaning outlets focused on it being a Democrat hoax. And a few mainstream outlets just downplayed it altogether. The facts were the same, but the framing was wildly different. Inside Ground News, you can pull up that story and instantly see every outlet covering it, left, right, center, all side by side. You can check the bias rating, see who's using loaded language, who's omitting details, and who's burying the lead. It's one of the only tools that actually helps you get out of the algorithm bubble and think for yourself. So if you want to see the news clearly, not just the narrative, go to groundnews.com/Kim and subscribe to get 40% off the Vantage plan using my link there. That's groundnews.com/Kim. Well, we did see the vote. There was one person who voted to keep them shielded. We'll get into that in a little bit. But Marjorie Taylor Greene is right when she calls Trump a traitor. Essentially, serving a foreign government makes you a traitor. And if that is the case, then nearly all of Congress are traitors. Practically everybody in Washington, D.C. is in trouble because the truth is Washington is packed with lawmakers who openly, proudly, unapologetically serve the interests of foreign nations, including Donald Trump. And the number one beneficiary is not Russia, not China, not Ukraine, not even the American people. It's Israel. So let's walk through this. We have members of Congress who take millions of dollars from AIPAC and affiliated PACs. AIPAC alone spent record amounts this cycle, tens of millions of dollars, backing candidates who represent Israel's interests, not the interests of Americans. You've got pro-Israel interests that spent hundreds of millions of dollars on Trump. And what does he do? He does Israel's bidding. There are dozens of lawmakers whose biggest donor, including Trump, year after year, almost Trump. Elon Musk was probably his biggest donor, but year after year. And Israel lobbying group is the number one donor to a huge number of our lawmakers. And those lawmakers almost always vote in lockstep with whatever Tel Aviv wants. You can go issue by issue and see the pattern. Israel wants more military aid. Congress signs the check. Israel wants unconditional support at the UN. Congress gives it. Israel wants the U.S. to criminalize boycotts of Israel. Congress tries to do it. Israel wants the U.S. to stay silent about Palestinian civilian deaths. Congress does it. It is the most reliable foreign alignment in modern American politics. And if you don't go along, AIPAC pours money into your opponent's campaign until you're removed. This isn't hidden. This isn't a secret. This isn't a conspiracy. They brag about it. And then there are the anti-BDS laws, which exist in more than 35 U.S. states. These are laws that literally punish Americans for exercising free speech if that speech criticizes Israel. It is unbelievable that this is going on in this country, that Israel has the power to essentially get rid of American rights, rights that we as Americans hold absolutely dear. It is unfathomable. It is disgusting. Imagine that. You can boycott American companies. You can boycott American police departments. You can boycott the U.S. government itself. But you can boycott your own state. You can boycott Christian organizations. You can boycott Muslim organizations. But you cannot boycott the state of Israel because lawmakers in both parties decided that Israel's interests matter more than the United States Constitution. Now, federal judges have struck these laws down as unconstitutional violations of the First Amendment, and what do states do? They rewrite them and try again. This is the level of influence we're talking about. But it's not just here in the United States. I want to make that clear. It's not just Israel that does that. Here's the part almost no one talks about here in the United States. Even though we should, certainly in Europe they do, it isn't only Washington that serves foreign powers. European governments do it too. And in some ways they do it even worse. Because while the U.S. political class often acts on behalf of Israel, well, European leaders consistently act on behalf of the United States. And they do it at enormous cost to their own people. Let's walk through what the Europeans have allowed the U.S. to drag them into. European governments follow U.S. foreign policy like gospel, even when it devastates their own economies. NATO says jump, they say how high. NATO wants more defense spending, done. NATO wants sanctions, done. NATO wants weapons for Ukraine, done. There's no independent European foreign policy. It's just the U.S. with local accents. And this is the big one. The Nord Stream pipeline, that was Germany's economic backbone. Germany spent billions and billions building its entire industrial model around cheap Russian natural gas. Then the pipelines exploded. There's massive evidence that the United States was behind the sabotage. Investigative reporters, experts, even former intelligence officials all point in the same direction. But the real scandal is Germany has not demanded any answers. Germany has not blamed anyone. Germany has not even complied. The country was attacked. Their own country was attacked. If its infrastructure blown up and Berlin just sat there pretending like nothing happened. Why? Because they can't confront Washington. They can't accuse the United States. They can't even raise the question. So instead, they accepted higher energy prices, inflation, factory closures, job losses, all to protect the relationship with the U.S. That is the definition of a government serving a foreign power over its own people. Cutting off Russian energy sent prices skyrocketing. Businesses shut down. Families struggled. Entire industries in Germany and Italy nearly collapsed. Meanwhile, the United States made a fortune selling overpriced gas to Europe. Again, Europe sacrifices the U.S. profits. European governments have poured billions into Ukraine while their own populations struggle with inflation and wage stagnation. Polls show Europeans are tired of the war. Farmers, truckers, industrial workers are protesting across the continent, but governments ignore them and continue the war effort because Washington insists on it. Europeans watch the U.S. conduct regime change campaigns and meddle in elections all across the continent. And what happens? They just have to sit there and, act like the United States is not the greatest foreign meddler in the European continent. Look at Iraq, look at Libya, look at Syria. It's not just in Europe, Afghanistan, Latin America, the former Soviet states. And yes, Ukraine. In 2014, everyone knows the U.S. did that. But European leaders still go along because they're politically, militarily, and financially dependent on Washington. Europe takes the refugee crisis. the U.S. keeps its hands clean. The U.S. destabilizes regions all across the Middle East and Latin America. But in the Middle East, Latin America, at least the United States has to bear the brunt of that. But in the Middle East, Europe has to absorb the refugees. Ordinary Europeans bear the consequences. And that one is directly tied to Israel. Europeans follow the United States. The U.S. follow Israel. Israel wants the Middle East destabilized so that they can maintain power and control, or trying to gain power and control. The United States does whatever Israel wants. Europe then has to absorb the refugees that Israel created, that the United States supported, and the United States now controls Europe because it's just a vassal continent. And yet, the European governments never push back on Washington's interventions that are led by Israel. U.S. sanctions on Iran, Syria, Russia, Europe suffers the most. Their businesses lose billions. American companies don't. Once again, Europeans pay, Americans gain. Even in Europe, governments suppress pro-Palestine speech, protests, slogans, taking positions that mirror Washington and Tel Aviv because Washington wants them to. France bans certain protests altogether. Germany criminalizes certain phrases. The UK cracks down on activists. This is not grassroots. This is geopolitical alignment with the United States. We blame Europe all the time. We say, oh, look at what the UK is doing. They're banning all this speech. But the reality is the U.S. asks them to do it. And the U.S. knows they don't have free speech in their constitution. They don't have a constitution. And so they do it. They do it. The geopolitical alignment with the U.S. and Israel, they all do it. Democracies suddenly, Western democracies, the bastion of freedom all around the world, right? They're suddenly banning speech here in the United States and in Europe. Not because Europeans demanded it, but because governments feel pressure to align with the United States, and the U.S. feels the pressure to align with Israel. Europe cannot defend itself without the United States, so they surrender sovereignty on foreign policy because they don't have militaries of their own for the most part. They've allowed U.S. militaries to be sprinkled all throughout their continent. That is another source of angst amongst the Europeans. No independence in strategy, no independence in intelligence. Factories are shutting down in Germany, France, Italy. Companies are fleeing to the United States for cheaper energy and subsidies. Europe sacrifices, America benefits. It's the same pattern everywhere. So many European leaders come from U.S.-backed think tanks, networks, and transatlantic institutions. They are socially and ideologically aligned with Washington, not their voters. European media mirrors the United States narratives on Russia, Ukraine, Israel, and China. Intelligence agencies collaborate closely with the U.S. It creates a Washington-centric worldview, which then you could argue is an Israeli-centric worldview. European countries buy American weapons, especially the F-35, helping U.S. defense contractors instead of building their own defense capabilities. Across Europe, the public increasingly opposes endless war and endless sanctions, but governments ignore them and march in lockstep with the U.S. strategy. That's why Europeans are starting to use the word traitor to describe their own leaders, too. So I want to make this point very clear. Marjorie Taylor Greene is calling Trump a traitor. That is probably, actually at this point, quite true. When you take $200 million from the Adelsons and you do everything Tel Aviv wants, and you've got Netanyahu flying to the United States smirking as he listens and knowing that the U.S. will do anything Israel asks for like a lapdog, I think the word traitor is quite fitting. And when you actually look at all of our American politicians who are beholden to their AIPAC lobby, and not just, AIPAC is a blanket term, kind of like Kleenex. We use it blanket. But there are many, many, many organizations and individuals like the Adelsons who are not funneling their money through AIPAC, but their money is all the same. It is money to support the state of Israel, not the United States. That is what it's for. And that makes them traitors. If you are serving a foreign country above and beyond the citizens of your own nation, if you are putting a foreign country first, if you are ignoring the plight, the pleas of your own citizens, and you're ignoring their own issues, you're putting them on the back burner for a foreign country, you are a traitor. I don't think it becomes any more clear than that. You are a traitor. And that unfortunately describes, I think at this point, Donald Trump. Many of us are seeing this. And it's not just Donald Trump. This is not unique to this particular American president. This has been going on president after president, administration after administration, Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter. It has been going on for decades. Our country has been sold out. We are operating under treason. Absolute treason has been going on in this country, all at the behest of whatever Tel Aviv wants. And Europe has been doing the same thing. But it's not necessarily Israel pulling their strings. It's the United States. It's NATO. The West, the bastion of democracy and freedom. They're all operating, all of these politicians all across the West are operating as traitors. And it's about time we use the label properly. Trump wants to call Marjorie Taylor Greene somebody who is unequivocally America first, someone who has been 1,000% fighting for the interests of Americans in America. They say the same thing about Zoran Memdani because he's born in a different country when he was the only politician who stood up on stage and said, why would I go anywhere? As all the other candidates for mayor said, Israel, Israel, Israel. I'd go to Israel. My first foreign trip, Israel, Israel, Israel. Memdani says, why would I go anywhere? I'm the mayor of New York. I'd be going to the 5 boroughs. That's what I'd be doing. And they painted him as a traitor while all of his other opponents sat there and said, Israel, Israel, flew the Israeli flag, went and kissed the Israeli wall. Who are the traitors here? And they're gaslighting us into thinking that Zoran Memdani, just because of his name and religion, is a traitor when he's the only one saying he's going to stand by America. That's why he won. Because he said, I'm here for Americans. I'm here for, not even Americans. He said, I'm here for New Yorkers. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is skyrocketing in popularity, even if Trump calls her a traitor, because nobody believes that everybody knows the real traitor is sitting in the White House as he does the bidding of a foreign country, anything they want. Marjorie Taylor Greene goes on to talk about what has been destructive to MAGA. Trump is sitting there saying, what's destructive to MAGA, essentially. It's not really, this isn't a direct quote, but you get the idea. He's essentially saying what's a threat to MAGA is these people who want to turn against Israel. You're a threat to make America great again if you turn against Israel, a foreign Middle Eastern country. And Marjorie Taylor Greene says, yeah, that's not true.
One of the most destructive things to MAGA is watching the man that we supported early on, 3 elections, for people that stood hours, slept in their cars to go to rallies, have fought for truth and transparency and to hold what we consider a corrupt government accountable. Watching this actually turn into a fight has ripped MAGA apart. And the only thing that will speak to the powerful, courageous women behind me is when action is actually taken to release these files, and the American people won't tolerate any other bullshit. That's where we are today.
That is exactly where we are today. We're not tolerating any more bullshit. We see it. We see exactly where it's coming from now. The American populace is wide awake. Eyes are wide open on this one. And Trump and anyone else who is pro-Israel is losing ground. I do believe in the next couple of election cycles, this will be the issue of the voters. The issue of the populace will be, where do you stand when it comes to Israel? And anyone who kisses the ass of Israel will likely be voted out. And it's about damn time. We got to take our country back. Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. It is free for you to watch. Again, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, KimIversonShow.com. See you there.